Rethinking Darwin came out as an idea that I had when I spoke with Bram Muhurta from the North European BBT in 2007, and we got the idea that we would like to make a publication for Darwin's bicentennial in 2009. Just a small thing that we actually could mass distribute all over the world to devotees and the public. However, as I started working on the book, it expanded, evolved, we might say, and more material was gathered. And then I contacted some different professional scientists like Michael Behe, biochemist, Bill Dembski, mathematician, Jonathan Wells, biologist, who are all famous as proponents of intelligent design. And they actually agreed to contribute a chapter each to, although they are actually Christians and they know it's a Hare Krishna book, but they agreed to contribute to it. And then also our own Druta Karma, author of Forbidden Archaeology, he also agreed to contribute a chapter on the human origin. So it just grew, and then it turned out actually it was more than just a simple publication, it would be an entire book. So that's what we have now, an entire book. And it took, another thing, it took also 2 years more. That's often the nature of book publication. So instead of 2009, it was now published here in the beginning of January 2011. Some have the impression that intelligent design is something that is a very Christian thing, has come out of the American Christian creationists. And actually, why do we want to get into that? Some have objected, actually. Actually, that is not a fact, if you look at it. Intelligent design as such is an ancient concept. It's a philosophical concept that, if you talk in terms of the West, goes way back, to the Greek philosophers, and has been all up through history. Scientists, philosophers have made intelligent design arguments. We also find it in our own tradition, Vedic philosophy. Baladev Vidyabhusana, for example, Prabhupada quotes him, making intelligent design arguments. And getting up closer to our time, we see that Prabhupada himself were making many design arguments. And also he had some of his devotee scientists developing intelligent design arguments. For example, and I have a quote here, it's in 1976, Srila Prabhupada met with the devotees, the scientists from the Bhaktivedanta Institute in Washington, D.C. on the 3rd of July. And there, the devotees, the scientists, gave a presentation to Srila Prabhupada on their work. So that time, Sariputta was given also a speech and with slideshows. And then at one point here, Sariputta, he tells to Srila Prabhupada, so we'd like to argue that the chance molecular forces theory won't explain things like this, but to say that there is an intelligent designer would be a sensible explanation. So see here, Sariputta is using the word intelligent designer in 1976, before Christians were using the word. And also in later publications in the 70s and 80s, Origins magazine, Sariputta's books and so on, he uses the word intelligent design and intelligent designer. So it is clearly not a Christian thing. It's something that we have been arguing for all along. And it's actually a very simple thing, intelligent design. It's not, as some would have it, it's something about that the Bible is literally correct and Earth is only 6,000 years old. Like, that's Christian creationism. But and also there are Darwinists who, in their, I'd say, propaganda campaign, want to lump these together, because then it's easy to brush off the idea that the Earth is 6,000 years old. So if you can just easily brush off intelligent design like that, well, that's easy. But intelligent design is something else. It's a, one sense, more simple thing, or a smaller claim, but it's a claim that life has features which must be intelligently caused, which cannot be the result of any kind of a chemical or physical process, and which cannot be caused of chance, but from all criteria must be intelligently caused. That's what it says, and it's something that we all do all the time. I mean, for example, now, if you enter a room, you're not in a natural cave. You can see it's a constructed thing you're inside, and you do it maybe subconsciously, but actually you could see that it's not the same. We are in intelligently caused environment. So similarly, if we look at biology, intelligent design theorists are looking at biology, and they're simply finding that there's so many features that cannot be explained materially or physically or chemically, but have all the features of being intelligently designed. It's a nanotechnology found inside cells. Cells are amazing structures. It's a nano robot. There's digital technology on the DNA. There are molecule machines. It's just astounding complexity. So intelligent design is simply the finding or the statement that this must be intelligently caused, and that's what intelligent design basically is. Darwin and the whole theory of evolution represents the main Mayavad philosophy of our time, actually. If we go back to the time of Lord Chaitanya, then the influence of Shankara was the main Mayavad influence, main impersonalistic influence. And we see that actually devotees not only were well-versed in Vaishnava philosophy, but they were probably even more well-versed than Mayavadis themselves in Mayavadi philosophy in order to be able to argue against it and defeat it. It's one of the, you should not only be able to know your own position, but also you have to know the your opponent's actual position and be able to argue against it if you want to establish your own conclusion. So it's clear that if we want to, and that we know was actually Srila Prabhupada's mission, was to defeat impersonalism and voidism, isn't it? Nirvishesha, Shunyavadi, Paschachya, Desatarini. That was his actual mission. And therefore, he was so intent on addressing this issue of Darwinism. Actually, if you know a little about Prabhupada's life and daily life, there wouldn't be a day practice when he was not talking about the scientists and talking about Darwin and talking about the rascals. And he clearly wanted us to address this, because as things stand today, the theory of evolution is actually the main cause of atheism in this world today. Just like you have the famous atheist Richard Dawkins said that Darwin made it possible to be a fulfilled atheist, intellectually fulfilled atheist. So that's clearly, evolution means atheism. Why? Because without it directly excluding God, it simply shows that you do not need God to explain the complexity of life. That was actually the understanding of, before Darwin, basically all scientists were agreeing, you can maybe explain certain things like gravity and so on just by physical law, but life is too complex, and you clearly need God or some intelligent agent to explain the origin of life. Darwin changed that, and the world became very atheistic because of that. So if we want to establish God consciousness or Krishna consciousness in this world, this definitely has to be addressed. It has to be addressed if in our interface with the external world. Many devotees also need it for themselves, because we are also very much affected by the environment that we come from, of course. So many have doubts actually. Well, maybe it is true that you can explain everything by evolution, and God and religion actually are just, you may need it as a psychological crutch, but you do not need it to actually understand reality. And then why should you believe it if you don't need it to understand reality? Rational people will not accept that. So therefore it's even important for our own Krishna consciousness, for our strong conviction, to also have these, if we have doubts, to have these addressed. And the thing is, actually, if you look at it, there's no reason to have doubts in this regard. I know there are devotees who are even toying with the ideas of some kind of theistic evolution and so on, because they somehow think that the evolution is such an established fact, there's no way around it. So somehow or another we have to, okay, evolution is there, and then bend our philosophy so that somehow, well, evolution, that is Krishna's way of creating this world or evolving life or like that. So, of course, whereas that might be a theoretical possibility, God could do it like that. But one thing, this is not what the Vedic scriptures are telling us. This is not what Bhagavatam tells us, how life was evolved and created. That's one thing. But the real thing is that the scientific evidence doesn't even support that. Darwinism is actually very, very weak scientifically. There is today, as things stand, there's not even a theory. It's more an ideology in search of a theory. The fossil evidence doesn't support it, and definitely biochemistry doesn't support evolution at all. The last 50 years, findings in biochemistry have completely overturned Darwinism. There is no theory which can explain what biochemists are finding inside cells. So that means actually, as things stand today, evolution is not a theory. It's a concept or an ideology that is hoping to find a theory in the future. And a lot of the argument is actually based on some theological premises, or one must say, negative theological premises, where you see, and Darwin himself was arguing like that, and you also find it, even this evolution is still arguing like that any sensible God would not have made a world like this. If God, if God existed, we assume that he was intelligent. But since this world is not at all intelligently created, therefore God cannot have created it, and it must be evolution. That's actually often the strongest argument. So, of course, as Vaishnavas, we should have such a deep understanding of God consciousness, Vaishnava theology, that we can immediately look through that. And therefore, at least my opinion, my conclusion is there's no reason for devotees to have any, need to go on compromise with Darwinism or anything like that. It's a theory, or it's a concept that is not really scientifically solid. And therefore my desire is that devotees study this, get into this for their own sake, for also explaining this to the world. That's why, I and actually also, because I was not alone, we were several people working on this book. That's why we put out this book.